With the release of chapter 305, we've been given the chance to view over the top 23 training methods for each player on the Blue Lock Japan team. Some are somewhat simple, and others are downright crazy. But why exactly did Ego assign each player to have these specific training methods? And what impact will that lead to for them in the future? Well, in today's video, I'll be going through all of these specific training regimens that Ego instructed for each of the Blue Lockers, and giving my reasoning and prediction as to why Ego gave each player those specific tasks. Now, keep in mind that this video is simply just a theory, and if you disagree with my theory and my prediction and my analysis, you are free to do so. But like always, before I get into the video, I want to leave a spoiler warning for the latest chapters of the Blue Lock manga, being chapter 305, and if you have not read it, I would suggest you click off this video now if you wish to not be spoiled. And also, join my Discord server. It's called the New Egoist Geeks, and the link to it is down below. Starting off with Blue Lock's main character, let's take a look at Yoichi Isagi and his training regimen. According to his letter from Ego, Isigi was tasked with learning about soccer, as the key to his next evolution was in the disc that he was provided with. Now, the statement of learn about soccer seems a little bit weird. I mean, it's not like Isigi is like the center face of the Blue Lock Japan team or anything. Oh wait, yes, he is. But provided along with the letter comes a plane ticket and a bunch of CDs with recorded games and footage of game-changing moments, as Isigi calls them. We don't really know what the plane ticket could mean in relation to Isigi's task, but we can make some theories on it in relation to the other contexts. With viewing over the game-changing moments, Isigi was not simply tasked to look over the goals that are scored, but the specific actions that led to the goals. This could be a trap, a pass, or just a specific way that the player uses their body. Isigi was assigned to view over these tapes in order to apply his kinetic vision and analysis better during a game. See, in the final NEL match against PXG, Isigi attempts to form a tri-fusion chemical reaction between himself, Kunigami, and Hiyori, which he does successfully, resulting in a goal being scored. However, the more you look at it, the more you realize that this goal was simply chance-driven. Isigi had no idea if he was actually going to be successfully drawing out Kunigami or Hiyori's ego, he simply just had faith in it. There was a possibility that they wouldn't move to support him. But because Isigi was going off of reflex and not confirmed intuition, his positioning and thinking were somewhat slower than if he had 100% confidence. By understanding these game-changing moments, Isigi can work and calculate other inputs of information on the field better and faster, which can lead to more goals being scored effectively. And you can also correlate this to his Omnivision ability, where Isigi can calculate irrational or illogical plays of geniuses like Destroyer Mode Rene. So by understanding triggers for moments like this during a game, Isigi would be able to process information quicker to make more accurate adjustments to the plays, and this could lead to even quicker and more deadly goals and positioning. Now, next up on our list of characters to talk about, we have Botto Shoei and his training regimen. Botto was seen arriving at a location where he was eventually confronted by a team of American football players who were instructed to teach him the ways of the sport. But why exactly would Botto need to learn about American football? Well, there are a couple potential reasons, but I believe the one that Ego assigned for Botto was the aspect of his own zone. During the match against Ubers, Botto consistently lost the ball due to Isigi or Isigi and Kaiser's presses, resulting in his shot being stopped 4 times. Now, some people like to equate this to Snuffy's designs when it related to Botto, but I believe that that's a little bit of a blame shift. Sure, Botto was told to shoot once circumstances were met, but he didn't tell Botto to telegraph his actions so clearly. There are other circumstances where Botto could set himself up for a shot. He just simply took the easiest one repeatedly, which led to his shot being stopped over and over again. But by training with the American football players, I believe that this issue gets resolved. Individuals can apply the skills of American football to soccer through the transferable lessons of zone reading, physical contact and control, as well as the power and physical increases to your body. All of these elements transfer over very well to Botto's current style. By training and understanding the zoning and placements of the opposing players in the way that a quarterback would, he can enhance his vision and placement of his shots, which I believe would drastically help when it relates to his application of Predator Right in his style, since Botto would likely consistently be using this ability when shooting. But this can also relate to the maintaining of possession when it relates to going against an opponent. Botto's style of keeping possession relates to his chop feints and his irrational style of mutual devouring. By playing with these American footballers, he can hope to increase the control he has in his movements to allow for his fakes to be more prominent, while also increasing his physical dominance over the play, allowing for him to deal with players like Isigi, who may attempt to take the ball from him. After Botto, though, we have another character whose name starts with B. Let's talk about Meguro Bachara and his training method. Ego instructed Bachara to go to an elementary school, specifically giving him the task of learn by teaching, and to feel your childhood. Now these are pretty vague instructions until you realize that Bacha was instructed to help a bunch of kids learn how to play soccer. Aside from this just being so incredibly wholesome, it relates so well to Bacha's character. As a kid, he was always shunned and ignored and socially outcasted for his passion for soccer, never really being understood by anyone. But now he has the chance to teach a whole group of kids the passion of soccer that he felt as a kid and to be a supportive pillar to them. It also reflects Lavinho in a way, since Lavinho understood Bacha's philosophy almost exactly, allowing for him to be coached by someone who knows exactly how he feels. Ignoring this element though, teaching kids is actually a very good thing for Bacha and his style. During the NEL, Bacha has shown some immense growth when it relates to his dribbling. However, the main flaw that comes up with this are his issues with pace and rhythm. During the Bacha game, the bastard players managed to understand and predict Bacha's dribbling rhythm, and while they did fail once, which led to a goal, Ness was able to intercept Bacha's play and steal possession simply because Bacha was attempting to reuse the same rhythm as before. By playing against these groups of inexperienced kids, Bacha would allow himself the chance to hone his dribbling rhythm while developing new ones. As the child of a school teacher, I've been told on numerous occasions that teaching kids the same way over and over again becomes less effective the more you do it. Through this training, Bacha can hope to develop new styles and dribbling patterns for him to use in the U20 World Cup, while also taking on multiple opponents at once, all while educating these kids about the joy of soccer. Now next up we have my favorite character in the entire series. Let's talk about Chigy and his training regimen. Now, unlike the other characters, Chigy is where we start to see the drop-off in relation to the context for these characters and their training regimens. We see Chigy practicing his swimming reps, where Ego instructs him to train to develop his body through swimming, specifically instructing him to become a fish. This training regimen is pretty clear. It's simply to boost his leg strength and the conditioning of his ligaments. Because of the environment that the water presents, using it as training for physical therapy is a common practice within and outside the realm of sports. And as we see from Chigy, his purpose of going to Manchan City was to strengthen the parts of his body which allow for him to run faster. But I do think that there was an ulterior motive when it related to this training. Ego specifically tells Chigy to become a fish, which I think could in some way relate to his style of mock cutting. Chigy constantly used his mock cuts to break through people in his time during the NEL, but I think that this constant style could lead to Chigy tearing his ACL again. During the episode Nagi manga, Chigy attempts to catch up to Aiki, however his leg begins to creak due to the angle at which he's attempting to turn. Assuming that Chigy made a sharp cut like this during the U20 World Cup, he could potentially tear his ACL again. Unless, ironically, he became a fish. Fish don't typically only make sharp cuts and turns. They can be more fluid and almost elastic with their movements, which I think Chigy could learn to utilize. Turning his speed from a direct sprint contest of straight angles to more curved presses could allow for him to break past markers easier. I mean, we saw Chigy get stopped by Kaiser due to his time that he took in making his mock cuts, so if he learns to be more elastic in his movements, he could actually benefit hugely. And this could potentially save Chigy from him tearing his ACL in the U20 World Cup, which I'm not a fan of that theory to begin with because he is my GOAT and I do not want to see him get injured. But after Chigy, we have a character who pairs really well with him. Let's talk about Rensuke Kunigami and his training regimen. We see during the chapter that Kunigami was assigned to practice boxing, specifically being instructed by Ego to become the strongest in hand-to-hand combat. Now, obviously, I don't expect Kunigami to just be throwing haymakers during the U20 World Cup like the Thing in Marvel Rivals. It's probably die. It's probably die. But I do think that this does hint towards his next involvement in the U20 World Cup. Kunigami in the NEL acted as a dark horse goal scorer, similar to a way that Botto was in the U20 game. However, rather than simply devouring Isigi, he's devouring any opportunities that he has to score a goal for himself. This includes the refusal to pass to Kaiser in the Bacha game, or the interception of Isigi's attempted shot in the Manchan game. However, during the PXG game, Kunigami was eventually shifted from a central attacking point to a defensive midfielder, tasked with the job of stealing Shido Ryusei's freedom after his goal in that match. And this was done successfully, leading to Kunigami stopping the ball from reaching Shido a total of 6 times in the 20 chapters that he was man-marking him. Eventually, Kunigami was pulled away from Zantatsu and was eventually subbed off due to his lack of stamina. But I think the latter is actually the reason for Ego's training here. By having Kunigami train in the ways of boxing, he's learning to leverage his physique in a 1v1 matchup, but also regulate and control his consumption of oxygen and stamina. And this could lead him to being a better man marker in the future. But I also think this could relate to Kunigami getting his hero ego back again. Having Kunigami trained to be the strongest does seem to relate to his ability as a man marker, However, the main issue is that Kunigami was only so invested as a man marker due to his desire to get revenge on Shido. Going into the U20 World Cup, however, I don't think he's going to be in a similar situation. But assuming that Kunigami can eventually get better in the matchups and scenarios of 1v1s and man marking, acting as the BLUELOCK Japan team guardian could potentially allow for him to reawaken his hero Ego again. This is just speculation, but I do see the possibility. Speaking of Shido, it's about time we talk about Shido Ryusei and his specific training regimen. What's funny about Shido's training regimen is that he wasn't ever really technically training. We see Shido in the chapter skydiving, with Ego specifically asking him to do everything that he's ever wanted to accomplish, with the added notion that BLUELOCK will pay for it all. Now, while this may seem a little bit weird, I do think that it could potentially lead to a Shido evolution. Shido is a player who has stated on numerous occasions that his purpose for playing soccer is life itself. So, in a way, Ego telling Shido to do anything that he's ever wanted to try is essentially him opening the door for Shido's creative liberties to shine in the future. And this is true, because out of every character in the series, players like Shido and Nagi are two of the most creative individuals in the entire show. So by opening up Shido's creative liberties, it would allow for even more impressive goals than the Big Bang Drive. And I could also see this being a way that we get a Shido backstory or simply development for his character. He's finally achieved all he wants from life. So now what does he do? It would be interesting to see Shido struggle with an element of his psyche, since that seems to be the area where he is the strongest. But maybe that's just me. Next up though, we have the other number 1 of BLUELOCK. Let's talk about Rin Itoshi and his training regimen. Looking at what Rin was tasked to do, it does make a lot of sense for his current character arc. Rin was assigned to train at a temple to understand the depth of his ego and destroyer mode. Ego specifically comments and says that destruction should not be your only impulse. We see that Rin tries to fixate on Sai and Isigi before getting whacked in the head by a monk for at least the 50th time. Now for this one, I do understand the importance of this training, I just don't really see where else it could go from here. This training is obviously designed to control Rin's impulses, leading him to being less self-destructive during a game. We see that Rin has actively sold many chances to score with the purpose of pursuing his own personal pleasure of crushing Isigi. And this training is likely designed to eliminate that impulse from the hyperfixation of one target to the destruction of an entire team. But that's just speculation at this point. I do think that the element of Rin training to harness his impulses in a way that doesn't harm the team's chances at winning is a very good thing, but as for what is going to come from this training, I really don't know. And for the last of the players who got some central development for this chapter, let's talk about Mikage Ryo and his specific training regimen. During chapter 305, Ryo is still mourning the conversation with Nagi as he was eliminated, where he was eventually tasked by Ego to become the master copy. And this would come from his training to copy every single one of the top 23 in just 2 weeks time. Now in my opinion, this training is going to make Ryo the greatest impact sub in the entire series. By having Ryo copy the abilities of anyone on the BLUELOCK Japan team, it would lead Ryo to being this incredibly powerful player. No matter the situation, Ryo can be adjusted into a formation or subbed on during a time moment to change the pace of the game, fitting into any space. And with his recent issues with Nagi, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, Ryo blames himself for Nagi's future being destroyed, so by tasking him with a seemingly impossible task, Ego is testing Ryo to see how far his ambition can take him. I think that this development could connect Ryo to Shido in a way, as they have both been showing some chemistry in the episode Nagi manga, but it could also relate to the way of both of the players pursuing something with their current life at stake. Maybe I'm reading too far into it, maybe I'm not reading far enough, who can say? Before I get into the rest of the characters though, I want to remind you guys that if you are enjoying this video so far, to leave me a like and subscribe down below to see more awesome BLUELOCK content just like this. It costs you guys absolutely nothing, and it helps me out immensely. And if you want to help even more, if you were to become a member of the channel, you would not only earn some awesome benefits like personal video requests and shoutouts and videos, but you would also get your name mentioned in the BLUELOCK New World movie as a contributor to the project, and this also applies to leaving super chats. So like, subscribe, and become a member to show your support for me and my content. Now starting off on our list of characters that we don't have a lot of context for, let's start by talking about Kadasu Tabito and his training regimen. During the chapter, we see Kadasu doing what appears to be long distance running or some kind of stamina training. And I think with Kadasu's recent development of Metavision, this makes a lot of sense. Metavision burns through stamina and energy like crazy, and with Kadasu's recent awakening of it in the PXG game, he would still need to go through that standard training to overcome the hurdle that comes with this ability. Sure, Kadasu has been a confident player with good physical abilities, but his stamina with Metavision has yet to be seen, so doing some stamina training is always a good thing. Following Kadasu, we have a character who pairs well with him. We have Atoya and his training regimen. For Atoya's training, it appears that he's in some kind of VR simulation. I've seen some people say that Atoya in this situation is supposed to increase his kinetic vision, kinda like Isigi in chapter 158, but I don't really know if that's the purpose for this. Looking at Atoya's philosophy in the episode Nagi manga, he seems to be very down to earth and chill. But given this, he doesn't seem to be very creative when it comes to going out of his way for things. He seems to be very responsive with his plays, as his off-the-ball style results in him reacting to passes typically set up for him by players like Kadasu or Bacha, who have more active play styles. Through the VR training, I could imagine that Ego is trying to help Atoya understand some creativity, becoming more active in his plays, allowing for him to be a reactive and active player. And I think that this could work well with his skills as a goal scorer or post player, as he can help contribute to plays in a more prominent way than simply just being used as another piece in it. I think Atoya's training, along with a lot of other Blue Lockers, there's a lot of room to interpretation because we get very little context, so maybe I'm wrong on this, but I don't know. But next up, we have a character who is very underrated in my opinion. Let's talk about Raichi Jingo and his training regimen. Looking at what Raichi was tasked with, it appears that he, like Botto, is learning from another sport, that being wrestling. And it's pretty obvious as to why Raichi is wrestling. It's to improve his core. Raichi's core and his stamina are two of his greatest assets, with his core in particular being the element that was highlighted by Snuffy in their matchup during the Ubers game. Raichi developing his core could be his way of enhancing his physicality for when he's played during the U20 World Cup, as we see that even his strength can be overpowered and ineffective if placed against another physical powerhouse like Botto, for example. There's really no other clear alternative motive for him doing wrestling aside from this. Maybe he could learn to do the center of gravity full burst like Rene does when he's in flow, but I'm not so sure we could ever see that happening. It would be kinda cool though. Now, like our last guy, we have someone whose training is pretty obvious for their character. Let's talk about Kiora Jin and his training regimen. Kiora appears to be doing some kind of parkour for his training, which fits given his character traits. Kiora possesses incredible body balance, allowing for him to maintain control over the ball even while being tackled or falling. We see this on display during the match against Nagi's team in the second selection, where after being pressed by both Botto and Nagi, Kiora manages to keep control of the ball and send a pass while breakdancing. But through his training for parkour, Kiora is learning to maintain his balance while doing it at high speeds. Kiora's other attribute, which I feel like gets ignored, is how agile he is despite his size. So by improving his balance at top speed through parkour, Kiora can highlight both elements of his style at the same time. I wonder if this training method could be connected to his borderline personality and style in some way, but I really can't figure it out given the context that we have. Speaking of speed, let's talk about another fast character and a fan favorite, that being Corona Bronze and his training regimen. We see that Corona appears to be running alongside a dog, specifically a Doberman. Now, I don't necessarily think that the training relates to the dog in particular, but the activities that he is doing with the dog. Corona's biggest weakness as of lately is his stamina, as he's burning out at the current levels of play when working with Isigi, as he just cannot keep up with his metavision. Now, I see some people try to argue that Corona having bad stamina isn't necessarily his fault, but that really just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Corona not being able to keep up with Isigi at his current level is an issue with his physical stamina. Isigi himself is burning tons of it while using metavision anyways, and if you pair a number of other characters up with Isigi, they would likely be able to keep up with his metavision on pure physical ability alone. So by training with this dog, running sprints and attempting to improve his stamina, he'll be able to create more consistent and powerful combo plays with Isigi, increasing the deadliness of their orbital resonance. I love Corona, he's one of my favorite characters, but you do have to acknowledge where he sucks so you can appreciate where he improves. Now next up we have a character that I'm actually very excited to explain why they have this specific training regimen. Let's talk about Audio Jubei and his specific training regimen. Looking at what Audio appears to be doing, he seems to be training in judo or karate, as he appears to be wearing a gi or some other related clothing. However, based on my predictions, I believe that Audio was tasked with training in judo. And this specific training is very important for Audio because it highlights both his weaknesses and his strengths. Audio possesses an incredibly large frame, allowing for him to make blocks and interceptive plays using his limbs on defense. He also has an incredible jumping ability, allowing for him to reach really high passes fairly easily. But as for where he's weak, this is shown mostly in his game against Bastard Munchen. During the final rally, Audio was seen marking Isigi. However, he was unable to keep a mark on him as Isigi and Hiyori performed their no-looker chemical reaction. But thanks to his training through judo, the skills he develops transfer incredibly well to his defensive style. Tall athletes when it relates to judo have to leverage their large frame and physique when it relates to sweeps and control. And this transfers well with Audio's style, allowing for him to be more dominant over the place for tackles, giving him a larger blocking range for his talents, and allows for a better interceptive range. But outside of his just standard defensive plays, it also relates to the Isigi moment that I mentioned earlier. Since judo requires fluid body movement, hip rotation, and timing, audio training in this area would allow for him to hold marks on more key individuals, increasing the fluidity of his body rotation and movement, allowing for him to hold those marks if needed. I think out of all of the characters and their training regimens in this video, Aryu's is by far one of the most interesting to me. Now we go from a very high analysis training regimen to a very obvious one. Let's talk about Nijo Nanase and his specific training regimen. During the chapter, we see Nanase practicing holding peas with chopsticks in both hands. Now this is pretty obvious what it's for. It's to train his natural ambidexterity. Despite what people may not realize, Nanase is one of the only individuals in the series who possesses full body natural ambidexterity. The only other characters that I know of who also have this ability are Shido and Noa. But the main reason that Nanase's ability isn't talked about enough is because Nanase is just really bad. The talent itself is good, but Nanase's application and utilization of it is what is poor, as even Rene comments about how bad Nanase is when it relates to his plays. This training is meant to allow for Nanase to improve, potentially making him a better post player or even playmaker going into the U20 World Cup. There's not much more to analyze given the context here, as it's pretty obvious, but I do hope that Nanase gets some improvement that doesn't just make him a bench rider the whole next arc. But next up we have another character who has another very interesting breakdown of their training. Let's talk about Shuto Sendo and his training regimen. Now for Sendo's training, it's a little bit weird. Sendo appears to be hunting or using some kind of rifle dowered in some camouflage clothing. While I see a lot of the usual jokes about Sendo's training, like the "what the hell is even BLUELOCK even about" or "not a ball in sight," I actually think that Sendo's training, like Aryu's, is very interesting and could potentially explain Sendo's evolution later in the series. Looking at what Sendo is doing, assuming that he is hunting, seems to track with Sendo's character. I mean, with hunting you need to be very precise and patient, and given Sendo's history of accuracy as we've seen in the U20 game and his impatient and kid-like nature, having him go hunting makes a lot of sense for his character. But there's also the added benefit and potential foreshadowing that Sendo will awaken Predator Eye. Now just hear me out on this theory. Assuming that Sendo is hunting, the sport itself is highlighted by patience, catching your prey off guard, and waiting for the precise moment to take the shot. Does that not describe exactly how Botto himself uses Predator Eye? And considering that Botto was on the same team as Sendo in the NEL, it wouldn't surprise me if Sendo correlated Botto's usage of Predator Eye to his hunting training. But there's also the added reasoning that Sendo has a restrictive type of ego, and Predator Eye is exclusive to restrictive ego types. We see in the U20 game, but also in the NEL, that Sendo appears in situations of disparity, seen with him stopping Bacha's goal in the U20 game and Hiyori's shot against Ubers. But Sendo also mentally seems to do his best when under pressure. Look at his performance during the U20 game as they enter halftime, with Sendo focusing on his next play given the dire situation that they are in. Sure, Rene does eventually stop him, but it doesn't disregard the mindset that he had going into that play. These factors scream to me that Sendo could potentially awaken Predator Eye, and with the manga confirming that Sendo will get some relevance in the future of the story, I think it's just a matter of time until that happens. Next up though, we have a character who I personally believe is a little bit overrated. Let's talk about Iki Nijo and his training regimen. Looking at Nijo's training, he appears to be lifting weights, which is a no-brainer for what Ego is trying to get out of Nijo. He's trying to make Nijo stronger. From what we see of Nijo and comments made about him, he is a very frail and weak individual when it relates to his physique. However, where he excels is his spatial awareness and kinetic vision. By having Nijo get more physically strong, they are trying to turn him into a second Aiku, which is good in theory, but I'm curious as to how it would apply to the actual execution. There really isn't too much to say about Nijo since his training seems to be fairly obvious, so let's just move on. Next up we have a character who gets very little context about. Let's talk about Hiyori and his training regimen. Now what's weird about Hiyori's training regimen is that given the angle that we see from him, we don't really get a lot of information. It appears that Hiyori is focused on something while having headphones on, but we don't really know what he's watching or even what he's doing. You could speculate that he's watching game footage like Isigi or playing video games like he's used to, but I don't really know and therefore we can't really say. After Hiyori though is a character that nobody likes, let's talk about Gen Fukaku and his training regimen. Looking at what Fukaku is doing, it appears that he is training by sitting under a waterfall. Now, out of everyone, ironically, Fukaku may have the most interesting and important training regimen out of any character that I've talked about so far. Fukaku is a player that really doesn't get a lot of screen time or respect, given Gagamoto's incredible skill and likelihood of being our starting keeper. However, Fukaku's training is meant to help him out with this. By sitting under the waterfall, it helps him deal with the pressure of the insults that the community spews at him for being dog shit, while also learning patience while he rides the bench for his time to be subbed on, which he never will. Now I'm sure you're asking, did I make this entire section as a joke to just shit on Fukaku? Yes I did. And now let's move on because nobody really likes Fukaku. But since we just spoke about him in reference to Fukaku, let's talk about Gin Gagamaru and his training regimen. From what we see, Gagamaru seems to be playing baseball. Now this too is obvious as to what it is for. It's to enhance his reflexive movements. Baseball players are heavily reliant on reflexive movement, especially to predict and catch incoming hits at top speeds. Personally, I'm headcanoning that Gagamaru is on the pitcher's mound during this interaction, as this calls in reference to pitchers who have to quickly react and catch shots that fly right at their face. I think that it would also imply a more intense training for Gagamaru, so I think it's a pretty cool headcanon. But yeah, no specific depth for his training, just simple reflex improvement. Nearing our end, we have one of my personal favorite characters in the series. Let's talk about Kenyu Yukimi and his training regimen. For Yukimiya's training, he appears to be training in Kendo. Training in Kendo makes a lot of sense for Yukimiya and his character, specifically with his eyes. Kendo, also known as Way of the Sword, is a modern Japanese martial art where individuals wear armor and use bamboo swords to score points through precise, disciplined strikes to specific target areas. It emphasizes not just physical skill, but also mental focus, spirit, and etiquette. And from what we know about Yukimiya's character, this training method is actually really good for him. The more Yukimiya works and the more stressed or exerted he becomes, the more his vision blurs. This training would allow for Yukimiya to focus on the spots that he can see and the clear parts of his vision to allow for him to not be affected by this medical issue. I think it also makes a lot of sense in the aspect of precision. Going back to the U20 game, Yukimiya has always been a decently accurate shooter, being able to change up his trajectory for his shots at the last second. And in the NEL against PXG, Yukimiya awakened Predator Eye, allowing for him to hit through tight gaps with little issue. By training in Kendo, Yukimiya seems to be improving his vision and composure while also targeting the weaker and more vulnerable areas, which call back to his ability as a goal scorer when it relates to soccer. Next up though, we have the dummy sprinter of BLUELOCK. Let's talk about Suzuki Zantatsu and his training regimen. Now Zantatsu's training, like a lot of others, is fairly obvious. He appears to be running track and field, with him positioned in a starting stance that runners usually take. This method is likely used to improve his acceleration, allowing for him to reach higher speeds and top speed at a faster rate. You can somewhat compare him to Loki in this regard, as Ego appears to be trying to make Zantatsu into a player who can immediately reach top speed when needed. I think that this makes the most amount of sense given that we didn't see a lot of improvement for Zantatsu under Loki's tutelage, but hey, maybe we'll see Zantatsu cook in the U20 World Cup. I wouldn't be opposed to it and I think it'd be pretty cool. And for the final character of this video, we have the GOAT and the former U20 captain, Oliver Aiku, so let's talk about him and his training regimen. Now Aiku's training seems to be different from the others, as he doesn't really seem to be doing any kind of physical training. We see Aiku sitting at a desk, reading some books and jotting down some notes. Based on just my speculation, I think that he's studying game material and game plans. I dropped a video on the previous weekend explaining how I believe that Isigi will be the U20 captain for Japan, and while I do think that it is a good possibility, I think that Aiku may have solidified his spot as the next captain. If Aiku is studying game material, he's placing himself in a more knowledgeable position to be the captain on the pitch during the U20 World Cup. This element, if it is game material, would not only give him the experience as a captain, the abilities of a captain, the confidence his team has in him as the captain, but now the understanding of more complex plays as the captain. I think that this chapter definitely secured Aiku as the next U20 World Cup captain for Japan, and while I was in favor for Isigi getting that title, Aiku does now seem to be the better fit. But that was simply my breakdown of the Blue Lockers and their training, and why Ego likely assigned each Blue Locker with the task that he did. Now this video was just speculation and a theory as to why Ego did what he did, and if you disagree with my speculation and my analysis, you're free to do so, you're entitled to your own opinion. But aside from all that, I hope you guys did enjoy this video, and will continue to enjoy it in the future. I also want to say thank you so much to all the members of my channel who help support me and my content. And if you wish to earn some awesome benefits like they do, and even get your name mentioned in the Blue Lock New World movie, become a member yourself, and help support me moving forward. And just a final reminder to join my Discord server if you're ever interested in getting any more involved with our amazing community. As for the question of the video though, who do you think will benefit the most from their respective training? Leave me your thoughts down below in the comment section. And like always, thank you all for watching, like and subscribe to see more awesome Blue Lock content just like this.